I'm Nolan Everett, a software engineer living in the small town of Westwood, about 100 miles from the state's largest city. Here, everyone knows each other pretty well, from small success stories to not so secret secrets. Westwood is the quintessential American town: quiet, green, but not without its share of gossip and the constant curiosity of its neighbors. My job is stable, allowing me to work from home most of the time, something I used to think was an advantage in preserving my marriage to Tessa, my wife. Tessa is an assistant at a small law firm. She's a talented speaker, always praised by her colleagues for her sharpness. We have been married for 8 years, have a son named Eli, who just turned 7 this year. For me, family used to be everything. Our life was initially the ideal in the eyes of many: a lovely bungalow down the street, friendly neighbors, BBQs on the weekends. But I realized that behind the smiles and friendly greetings, Westwood was more than just a peaceful place. It was also a place where anyone would gossip about you if there was anything unusual. I always thought Tessa was happy with the life we built, until she gradually changed. Family meals became rarer, and she often came home late. Tessa used work as an excuse, but sometimes her excuses were not convincing. The phone calls she secretly listened to in the kitchen, the way she became irritable with me over the smallest things, all of it made me feel uneasy. I'm not one to speculate, but it all became clear when my brother Carter introduced us to his friend, Barrett Lawson, at my mother's birthday party. Barrett was a handsome man, charming and confident. He worked in real estate and always knew how to capture the attention of everyone in the room. I didn't think much of Barrett until I noticed Tessa's gaze on him. It wasn't just the usual social gaze, but an unusual attention, something that no husband, no matter how innocent, could ignore. The feeling made me uncomfortable, but I reassured myself that I was probably overthinking things. My family is very traditional, with conservative values ingrained in our way of life. My mother, a strong woman, always talked about upholding family honor as an unwritten rule. My father, although no longer alive, was a former soldier and always taught us to protect what was important. These things have deeply influenced the way I view marriage and fidelity. The Westwood community is similar, a place where family and loyalty are valued, but where people don't miss an opportunity to pick on each other. Gossip is rife at gatherings here, and I know that if there's any rift in Tessa and I's lives, it will be the main topic of conversation. But I still believe that we could overcome all difficulties. I used to think that as long as I loved and trusted Tessa, everything would be fine. But the feeling of insecurity wouldn't let me go. And then it led to the day that everything changed. A week before the truth came out, I got a call for a tech conference in a big city. It was a great opportunity to network with people in the industry and stay up to date on the latest trends. I planned to stay for 2 days, but the conference ended early. I missed home, I missed Eli, and I was tempted to surprise Tessa by returning early. I told myself that our marriage might just be going through a rough patch. A surprise romantic evening, some heartfelt words, might just get our relationship back on track. I drove through the night and arrived in Westwood just as the clock struck 8 p.m. It was chilly, and the yellow lights from the houses on either side of the road gave off a familiar warmth. I imagined Tessa and Eli at home, probably watching their favorite family movie together. When I got home, I walked into the living room, intending to surprise her, but what I saw broke my heart. Tessa, the person I trusted the most, and Barrett, who I'd only seen as a passing face in my life, were sitting on the sofa, but it wasn't the way friends usually sit together. Barrett's arm was around Tessa's shoulder, and she leaned her head on his shoulder, her eyes half closed as if she was enjoying the moment. I stood in the doorway, the darkness of the hallway closing in on me, masking my presence. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. Part of me wanted to storm in, scream, and demand an explanation. But my rational mind, clouded by rage, fought to keep me sane. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking, and turned on video. It all happened in a matter of seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Barrett leaned toward Tessa, whispered something, and she giggled. The laugh that had made me love her when we first met now disgusted me. I filmed long enough for no one to deny it, then quietly stepped back, closed the door softly, and returned to the car. I sat in the car in the dark, my mind in turmoil. The reason I chose to leave instead of confronting him right away was because of Eli. Where was he? Did he see this? I opened my phone and texted Tessa. I just got home, but realized I left an important document at the office. I think I'll be heading back to the city. You and Eli, get some rest. I hit send and wondered if she realized this message was not just a notification, but also a silent warning that I was home. As I drove out of town, I tried to sort it all out in my head. Why did Tessa do this? Why Barrett? He wasn't the guy I thought she'd be interested in. A dashing, slightly arrogant guy, far from my safe type. But maybe that was why. I started questioning myself. Had I been too focused on work and neglecting her? Was I no longer attractive enough? These questions not only made my head spin, they made me angry. Angry at myself for letting things get so out of hand. But I was more angry at Tessa. Angry that she had betrayed me. That she had betrayed our family. After driving around town to calm down, I decided that I wouldn't do anything rash. I knew I needed time to think and figure things out before I acted. I got home just as the clock was approaching midnight. The house was dark and quiet, as if nothing had happened. Tessa was probably already asleep, and Eli was sure she was too. The next day, I tried to act normal. At breakfast, I asked Tessa, I came home late yesterday. Is everything okay at home? She raised her head, a little confused, but quickly regained her composure. Yes, Eli went to bed early. I'll rest too. Why didn't you tell me in advance so I could prepare dinner? Her answer struck me as both deceitful and shameless, but I didn't show it. I spent the day working in my home office, but my mind was constantly calculating my next move. I knew I needed more evidence, something irrefutable. I decided to install hidden cameras in my house. This was not easy because I had to do everything discreetly so that no one would notice. Over the next few days, I began to pay more attention to Tessa's actions. She lied skillfully, but I could see the cracks. She was coming home later than usual, and a few times, I noticed her deleting messages on her phone as soon as I walked into the room. One evening, I saw her wearing a dress that she never wore on a normal evening at home. When I asked her if she was going anywhere, she replied perfunctorily, I was trying it on to see if it still fit. I haven't worn it in a long time. Little details like these weigh heavy on my heart. My love for Tessa is now overshadowed by anger and pain. In the days since setting up the hidden cameras and gathering more evidence, I realized that confronting Tessa and Barrett directly was not an immediate solution. The only thing I could do was observe and keep quiet, like a detective in my own home. I knew that the truth would eventually become clear if I was patient. A week passed in tense silence. Every morning, I sat in front of my computer screen, checking the footage from the cameras I had placed in key locations: the living room, the hallway, the kitchen. Each minute of the footage was a small piece of the puzzle of betrayal that I didn't want to believe was real. I felt like an invisible person in my own life. Every morning, I sat across from Tessa at breakfast, trying to maintain a calm face while my insides were in turmoil. I couldn't understand how she could act as if nothing was happening. I began to notice little details I hadn't noticed before. The way she kept her phone in her hand, the way she avoided eye contact when I asked about work, the way she became irritable whenever I suggested spending time with her family. What hurt me the most, however, was not the betrayal, but its brazenness. Barrett was not a stranger to my family. He was a close friend of my brother Carter. It was Carter who had introduced Barrett to Tessa at a party at our house a few months ago. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Barrett appeared to be a gentleman and overconfident, but I never thought he would become a threat. Looking back now, I can't help but blame Carter. But I also know that Carter was not at fault for this. He couldn't have known that the friend he trusted would do such a terrible thing to my family. One evening, I decided to check Tessa's phone again. It wasn't my habit, but now things had changed. When she went into the bathroom, I quickly unlocked her phone with a password I'd guessed long ago. Eli's birthday. Barrett's messages appeared at the top of the list. The brief but meaningful exchanges stung. Do you remember that night? I will never forget your eyes. Next time, I want to stay with you longer. I took screenshots of these messages and put my phone back. Tessa didn't know it, but to me, each message was a deeper stab at the trust I once had in her. It was clear now. Tessa and Barrett were more than a mistake. They were carrying on an illicit affair right under my nose. I knew what I had to do next. Not just confront her, but to come clean in front of all our loved ones. I didn't want this to be just a fight between the two of us. I wanted it out in the open so Tessa couldn't deny it, and so everyone knew I wasn't a fool who would be fooled forever. Barrett's messages, one Friday afternoon, while I was working in my home office, I heard the front door open. I knew it was Tessa because Eli was at school, and I had made sure to lock the front door. But then, another voice rang out. Barrett's. I felt a surge of electricity run through me. He didn't just show up at night, when I could tell things would be clandestine. He was confident enough to walk into my house in broad daylight, as if this was his domain. I opened the office door and walked down the hall, silent as a shadow. Tessa's laughter echoed from the kitchen. Barrett was saying something, and she was replying sweetly. I heard every word, but the words were like a knife to my pride. I walked back to my office, closed the door, and sat down. My mind was running through a dozen ways to deal with this. Walk out of the room, catch them red-handed, scream, bang on the table, maybe even hit Barrett. But I knew that would only make things worse. I decided to keep my cool. I would let them have their brazenness. For now, I opened the camera app on my computer and pulled up the live feed from the kitchen. Tessa was pouring them both wine, and Barrett was smiling, looking relaxed. They were talking about a trip they were planning, a weekend at a resort a few hours away. I recorded the video, adding it to a collection of evidence that would have been enough to embarrass anyone. After listening to them talk for about 15 minutes, I saw Barrett preparing to leave. As he walked out the door, I heard Tessa say, "I'll try to get everything sorted out. Don't worry." The words rang in my head like a bell. Tessa wasn't just cheating. She was deliberately adjusting everything in her life to facilitate her betrayal. That evening, I met Carter. We arranged to meet at a small bar in town where we both went to watch football or have a beer after work. Carter had no idea what was going on, and I decided not to say anything either. Instead, I focused on Barrett. "How has Barrett been lately?" I asked casually, as if curious about his friend's life. Carter laughed and said, "Oh, he's still the same. He's always been a show-off, but honestly, I'm starting to get annoyed. Lately, he's been hanging around people I don't think are right for him." I kept my face calm, but inside I was seething. Carter didn't elaborate, but his answer confirmed my suspicions. Barrett was the type of person who would invade other people's lives without hesitation. Carter continued. He told me about a woman he was seeing, but he didn't say her name. He just said she was married. Weird, right? Carter's words hit me like a hammer. I tried my best to keep my expression from showing. I smiled faintly, shook my head, and said, "Maybe he likes difficult things." In my mind, I knew I had enough reasons to hate both Barrett and Tessa, but now was not the time to explode. I just needed a little more time to perfect my plan. The next evening, while Tessa was in the shower, her phone rang. I saw Barrett's name on the screen, and instead of calling her, I quickly pressed the answer button. On the other end, his voice said, "Hello. I wanted to know if the weekend plans were okay." I tried to keep my voice calm, low, and serious, so he wouldn't recognize me right away. "Maybe we should talk in person." He was silent for a few seconds, then hung up in a panic. I felt a surge of anger, but at the same time, I knew that my actions had sent a clear message. I knew everything. When Tessa came out of the bathroom, I pretended like nothing happened. She smiled and asked, "Why do you look so stressed?" I looked at her for a long moment before replying, "Nothing. Just a long day." There was so much meaning in that statement, but she didn't seem to notice. I knew Tessa was so used to hiding things that she believed I didn't know. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, I began to plan my final act. A family gathering where I would lay it all out. I knew that facing Tessa alone wouldn't work. She could deny it, she could turn around and accuse me of being out of control. But in front of my family, she couldn't hide. I called my mom and told her I wanted to have a small family party next weekend, using the excuse of our upcoming wedding anniversary. My mom was excited and agreed immediately. I also texted Carter and asked him to invite Barrett, under the pretext that I wanted to thank him for helping Carter with his work. The weekend came sooner than I expected. I woke up earlier than usual that morning, double-checking everything to make sure my plans were perfect. My mother was ready for the family dinner and was very excited. She loved these gatherings, where the whole family could sit together, eat, and share stories. I knew this would shock her, but it was the only way to get the truth out. Tessa seemed more relaxed than I expected. She was wearing a pale blue dress, her hair was neatly tied back, and her face was radiant. I wondered if she felt a little guilty, or if she was just used to pretending that everything was okay. Throughout the morning, she helped prepare the food and even texted Carter to make sure Barrett would be there. Little did she know that this only made her brazenness more obvious to me. By noon, everyone had begun to gather at my mother's house. Eli was running around, enjoying himself with his cousins. Carter appeared casually casual, unaware that he was an unwitting part of the plan to expose the truth. Barrett arrived shortly after, with a confident smile and a tailored suit, as if he had nothing to hide. I watched Tessa from a distance. When Barrett entered, she tried not to be too familiar, but her eyes said it all. The tension inside me grew, but I kept my cool. I knew I had to wait for the right moment to act. The meal began like any other gathering. People were talking, laughing, and reminiscing about happy times. I tried to join in the conversation, keeping myself as normal as possible, but inside I couldn't stop thinking about what was about to happen. After dinner, we moved into the living room. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I made an excuse that I had a special video I wanted to show the family on the TV, a gift for Tessa and I to celebrate our wedding anniversary. The room fell silent. I saw curiosity in everyone's eyes. Tessa smiled, perhaps thinking this was a romantic gesture from me. But a few seconds after the video started playing, her smile faded. On the screen, the video I had recorded from the hidden camera appeared. Barrett's entrance, Tessa's intimate gaze, and the unmistakable actions between them. The whispers, the affectionate words, all were clearly recorded. The room was so quiet you could hear your breathing. I looked around and saw my mother put her hand to her chest, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Carter's eyes widened, staring at Barrett, then back at Tessa. Barrett, always confident and easygoing, now looked like a child who had just been caught stealing candy. Tessa stood up abruptly, her face pale. She stammered, "Nolan, how could you do this? This is no way to solve a problem." I kept my voice calm but firm. "Isn't that the way to solve the problem? What do you think is the right way to solve the problem? Cheating on your husband? Bringing him into our home where Eli is growing up?" As soon as the video ended, the air in the room seemed to drain. All eyes turned to Tessa and Barrett, the main characters in the video. Carter was the first to break the silence. He turned to Barrett, his voice filled with anger. "What the hell are you doing? This is my brother's family. How dare you betray my trust like this?" Barrett tried to back away, raising his hands defensively. "Look, it's not what you think. I'm not trying to sabotage anything." But before he could finish, Carter lunged forward. He grabbed Barrett by the collar and roared, "No sabotage? You think this isn't sabotage? You son of a bitch!" I had to quickly step between them to prevent Carter from charging straight at Barrett. As much as I wanted to let Carter's anger explode, I knew we couldn't let things get too far, at least not in terms of violence. Tessa, pale, tried to regain her composure. She looked at me, her voice trembling. "Nolan, I didn't mean to hurt you. I felt lonely. You were always busy with work, and I didn't know how to tell you how I felt." That statement added fuel to the fire. I turned to look at her, trying to keep my voice calm but not hiding the sarcasm. "Lonely? And this is how you deal with loneliness? Betraying me? Bringing him into our home?" My mother, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke up. She put her hand on Tessa's shoulder, not to comfort her, but to express her disappointment. "Tessa, how could you do this to this family? Nolan and Eli don't deserve this." Tessa began to cry, but this time, no one in the room showed any sympathy. Barrett, now completely bereft of his usual confidence, tried to find a way out. He spoke quickly, almost pleadingly. "I think I'd better go. I don't want to cause any more trouble." Carter wasn't going to let him off that easy. He pointed at Barrett and shouted, "Don't ever come back here again. If I ever see you near any of my family again, you're not going to get any peace with me." Barrett bowed his head and walked quickly out the door without daring to look back. The sound of the door closing behind him marked the end of his presence in our family. After Barrett left, I looked back at Tessa. She was standing there, tears streaming down her cheeks, but I no longer felt pain from it. I just felt emptiness. "Do you have anything to say to me?" I asked coldly. She choked up, "I know I was wrong, But please, think of Eli. We can start over, right? For our son? I laughed coldly, a laugh that carried no joy. Do you think I can ignore everything just because of Eli? You have destroyed the trust I had in you, and that cannot be repaired. Tessa fell to her knees, sobbing, but I knew I couldn't be moved. This was no time to be weak. This was a time to protect myself and my son from a relationship that was completely rotten. My mother pulled me aside, her eyes filled with worry. Nolan, what are you going to do next? Tessa is Eli's mother after all. You need to think carefully. I shook my head. Mom, I can't forgive her. I will do everything I can to make sure Eli doesn't grow up in a family where trust has been destroyed. Carter, still in shock, approached me. Nolan, I really didn't think Barrett was this kind of person. I'm sorry I brought him into your life. I patted his shoulder, trying to reassure him. Carter, this isn't your fault. Barrett chose this path, and so did Tessa. We can't change them. After the family gathering, when everything was out in the open, I knew that simply humiliating Tessa and Barrett in front of their families wasn't enough. I didn't want to just embarrass them temporarily. I wanted their actions to have lasting consequences, to make them understand that bad decisions can not only destroy other people's lives, but also put them on a path of no return. The first thing I did was contact Reagan Clark, the attorney I'd hired to represent me in my divorce. Reagan is a strong and intelligent woman, with a flair for handling complex divorces. When I presented all the evidence of Tessa's infidelity, she looked at me firmly and said, "We're going to do this in a way that not only will you get custody of the children, but you'll keep everything that's yours. Tessa won't have a chance to overturn this." Our plan began with filing for divorce. Reagan quickly drafted a complaint, detailing all of Tessa's wrongdoings. At the same time, she demanded that Tessa leave our home while we awaited trial. I know Tessa was most proud of her career. As a paralegal, she had always considered herself smart and ethical. But her betrayal showed that this was just a facade. I sent evidence of Tessa's affair to Douglas Grant, her boss at the law firm. Douglas was a middle-aged man known for his strictness and zero tolerance for any unethical behavior. When I arrived at his office, I simply said, "I think you need to see what your assistant has done. This is clear evidence of her violating the ethical principles that your law firm has always held dear." Douglas didn't say much, but I could see his expression harden as he read through the videos and messages I provided. 3 days later, Tessa returned home, looking shocked. She had been fired immediately. As Tessa struggled to cope with unemployment, I turned my attention to Barrett. He had not only destroyed my marriage, but had also used his friendship with Carter to infiltrate our family. I knew that Barrett was most proud of his work in real estate, where he made a lot of money through his connections and his ability to persuade clients. I approached some of Barrett's major clients through Carter's contacts. In a meeting with a prominent real estate investor, I explained that Barrett was under investigation for illegal activities. I wasn't lying. What I'd heard from Carter about Barrett's shady dealings was true. As a result, within a few weeks, Barrett lost 2 major clients and faced the prospect of having his contracts canceled. Not only did Tessa lose her job, but she also faced financial worries. The house we had lived in was now mine, and she didn't have enough money to buy or rent a new apartment in a good area. With the small amount of support I agreed to pay, Tessa had to move into a small apartment in a lower income part of town. Barrett, meanwhile, was discovered by his ex-girlfriend Marley about his relationship with Tessa. Marley was known for her hot temper and outspokenness. When she learned the truth, she did not hesitate to take out her anger on Barrett. Barrett's beloved vintage Mustang was burned by Marley right in front of his house. Barrett, without the support of his job and friends, fell into financial crisis. He started engaging in illegal business activities to make money, but that only made the situation worse. Not long after, I heard that he was arrested by the police for his involvement in a bootlegging operation. One evening, Tessa appeared at my door. She was wearing a thin coat, looking more haggard than ever. She looked at me, her eyes red and swollen, as if she had been crying all night. Her voice was trembling. "Nolan, I know I was wrong. I'm not asking you to forgive me, but please give me a chance to make it right. For Eli's sake, I don't want things to end like this." Looking at her, I no longer felt anger or hatred. All I felt was emptiness. Her actions had caused me to lose the love, trust, and image I once had of my wife. I calmly replied, "Tessa, I won't stop you from seeing Eli, but I can't go back. You ruined everything yourself, and now you have to take responsibility for that decision." She burst into tears, but I didn't let that shake me. I knew this was the only way to protect myself and my son. Since her appearance at my door, Tessa seemed to have completely disappeared from my and Eli's daily lives. I didn't actively look for her, but I knew from acquaintances in town that her life wasn't easy. Tessa's small apartment was in the south end of Westwood, a neighborhood notorious for its overcrowded neighborhoods and poor living conditions. I'd heard her say several times that she had to work part-time at a nearby coffee shop to make ends meet, a stark change from her days working at a law firm with a steady paycheck. Eli asked me a few times about his mother. I didn't want to put any negative thoughts in his head, so I just told him that his mother was busy with her new job and would visit him when she had time. I kept my promise to let Tessa see Eli, but I always made sure that those meetings were in a neutral space, avoiding exposing him to her cramped apartment and her current life. While Tessa struggled with her new life, Barrett was devastated. After being arrested for his part in a bootlegging ring, he was sentenced to 18 months in prison. News of Barrett's arrest quickly spread throughout Westwood, making him the talk of the town. Carter came to see me the day after he heard the news. He looked tired, his eyes dark as if he had been through a long night. "Nolan, I don't know what to say. I really didn't think Barrett would go this far. I'm sorry I brought him into your and Tessa's lives." I patted Carter's shoulder, trying to comfort him. "Carter, you don't need to apologize anymore. This is not your fault. Barrett chose that path himself. You were the best brother he ever had, but he destroyed it all. Even though things ended the way I wanted, I didn't feel completely at peace. There were nights when I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had done the right thing. The revenge I had taken may have cost Tessa and Barrett their lives, but it also left a void in my heart. I wondered if I could forgive Tessa, not to go back, but to free myself from the hatred and bitterness. I remembered my mother's words after the family gathering. "Nolan, forgiveness is not for the other person. It's for yourself. If you can't let go, it will haunt you for the rest of your life." Those words kept echoing in my head, and I knew that one day I needed to learn to forgive, but right now I wasn't ready. A few months after our divorce, Tessa started trying to reach out to me more. She texted, called, even wrote me letters, something she had never done before. In those letters, Tessa not only apologized, but also talked about what she had realized after all this. "Nolan, you were right. I ruined everything because of my selfish feelings. I don't expect you to forgive me right now, but I hope one day you'll see me trying to be a better mother, a better person." I didn't answer right away. I needed time to think, but I began to sense a sincerity in her words that I had never felt before. With Eli, I tried to keep things as stable as possible. I spent more time with him, from weekend camping trips to movie trips that we rarely did before. He seemed happier, though he still asked about his mother sometimes. I started going to individual counseling sessions. The conversations with the therapist helped me realize that overcoming grief doesn't mean forgetting what happened, but learning to live with it and finding new happiness. In one counseling session, I was asked, "If Tessa really changes, are you willing to give her a chance to be a part of Eli's life?" I thought for a long moment before answering, "If it's good for Eli, I'm willing to consider it. But going back is not. I don't think I can trust her again." A year after the divorce, I noticed that Tessa was really trying to change. She had found a new job, an administrative position at a nonprofit in town. She attended parent-teacher conferences at Eli's school, was respectful, and didn't pressure me to come back. Gradually, I began to let her spend more time with Eli, but only in situations where I felt safe. Her change made me think that, perhaps, people can actually learn from their mistakes. Even though Tessa and I have ended our story, I feel like I'm starting a new chapter in my life. Barrett is gone from our lives forever, and all he has left behind is a lesson in betrayal and greed. Eli is growing up in an environment that I try to make as stable and happy as possible. While the journey hasn't been easy, I know I'm on the right path, and for the first time in years, I feel lighter than I've ever felt before. One bright morning, I received a letter from Tessa. This was not unusual, as she had written many letters since our divorce. But this time, its content made me stop and reflect. "Nolan, I know that no apology can erase what I did, but I hope that my actions now can make up for it in some way. I have learned to face myself and admit my mistakes. Eli is the only thing left of me, and I want to do everything to be worthy of being his mother. I'm participating in a counseling program for people who have been through a marriage crisis, hoping that my experience can help others avoid similar mistakes. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want to thank you for not letting me fall completely. I read the letter over and over again. Tessa, though no longer my life partner, had begun a new journey to become a better person. I no longer felt hatred. Instead, I felt a little relieved, as if a burden had been lifted. While Tessa tried to change, Barrett wasn't so lucky. After serving his sentence, he returned to Westwood, hoping to start over, but the small town never forgot what he had done. He became a household name in coffee shops and supermarkets, a figure to be avoided. Barrett tried to open a small real estate business, but no one trusted him anymore. The rumors, combined with his previous conviction, left him without a place to stand. Within a few months, he left Westwood, and no one knew where he went. As for me, that was the last time I heard from him. Eli and I got our lives back on track. I decided to join a group for single dads, where I met people who had gone through similar things. They were not only friends, but also people who helped me understand that I was not alone. One evening, while preparing dinner, Eli asked me, "Dad, are you sad about Mom?" I paused, looked at him, and smiled. "I'm not sad, son. Your mother and I have gone our separate ways, but that doesn't mean we don't love you. We both want you to be happy." The boy nodded, and I knew that no matter what, Eli and I would always be family. I decided to meet Tessa for a frank talk. We arranged to meet at a small cafe in the center of town. When I walked in, I saw her sitting in the corner, looking calmer and more relaxed than the last time I saw her. "Tessa, I don't want to hold any grudges. I want us to do what's best for Eli. I believe you're trying, and I appreciate that." She smiled, her eyes wet with tears. "Thank you, Nolan. I know I can't change the past, but I will do everything to make Eli proud of his mother." I nodded, feeling a part of me release, not because I completely forgave her, but because I'd learned to accept. Life isn't always easy, but I've learned to appreciate the little things. I've spent more time with Eli, helping him explore the world around him and learn to cope with hardships. Despite the trauma I've been through, I know that I've not only survived, but I've come out stronger. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that the past can no longer control me. As a friend once said, when one door closes, another opens. Sometimes you just have to be brave enough to walk through it. And I knew I was ready to walk through that new door with Eli, who always reminded me that happiness is not so far away. Looking back on my journey, I realized that the breakdown of my marriage was not just an end, but also a new beginning. As painful as it was, it taught me valuable lessons about trust, responsibility, and self-worth. In any relationship, loyalty is not just a promise, but the foundation of mutual trust and respect. When Tessa broke this, our family fell apart. But I also realized that loyalty is not just a responsibility, but a commitment that both people need to keep together. I also learned that my self-worth does not depend on what others think of me. During my most difficult times, I used to think that I was not good enough, that I had failed as a husband. But over time, I understood that Tessa's actions were not because I was not good enough, but because she was not strong enough to face her problems. From then on, I began to love myself more and understand that my value lies in how I live and treat others, not in how others see me. My son Eli is the light of my life, and since the breakup of my marriage, I have realized even more the great responsibility I have for him. Being a father is not just about providing material things, but also about guiding and leading by example. I have learned to take the time to listen to him, to understand his worries and feelings. I always remind Eli that no matter what happens, my love for him is unconditional. I also try to teach my son about honesty and self-respect. Through my own story, I hope Eli will understand that life is not always easy, but if you live honestly and hold on to your values, you will overcome any hardship. Children learn from their parents, and I want to make sure my son sees in me a role model he can be proud of. One of the hardest lessons I had to learn was forgiveness. At first, I thought forgiveness meant forgetting everything that had happened, but that was not the case. Forgiveness didn't mean that I agreed with Tessa's mistakes, but that I was choosing to let go of my anger and bitterness and find peace. Holding grudges only kept me stuck in the past, and that did not serve me or Eli. I also learned to accept that no one is perfect. Tessa made a huge mistake, and she paid the price for it. But I also saw her trying to make amends and be a better mother. That doesn't change the past, but it helps me realize that sometimes people really can change if they really want to. During difficult times, I realized that the strength of community is an indispensable factor in overcoming adversity. Joining a group for single dads helped me find empathy and support. Their stories not only helped me realize that I was not alone, but also inspired me to keep going. Even though I live in an American society that values self reliance, I know that no one can solve everything on their own. Seeking help from family, friends, or professionals is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of courage. Through the support of those around me, I find the strength to keep moving forward. As things settle down, I realize that happiness is not a destination, but a journey. I learned to appreciate the little moments in life, Eli's smile, the peaceful mornings, or the evenings camping under the stars. Happiness is not the absence of hardship or suffering, but the ability to find meaning and value in those challenges. As a friend once said, when one door closes, another opens. Sometimes you just have to be brave enough to walk through it. Now I know that I am ready to step through that new door with Eli, who always reminds me that happiness is not so far away. My story shares valuable lessons and messages to everyone. First of all, cherish what you have. Loyalty, trust, and mutual respect are the most precious things in any relationship. If you have them, keep them and protect them. Second, never lose your self-worth. No matter how difficult life is, remember that you deserve to be loved and respected, but first of all, love and respect yourself. Additionally, learning to forgive and let go is essential. Forgiveness is not forgetting, but allowing yourself to move on and move towards a better future. Finally, always look for hope. No matter how bad things seem, believe that you can get through it. With the help of family, friends, and community, nothing is impossible.